You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and we are very excited to have you with us this week. In fact, I was just talking with our members club, and they are live here on the call. And we were competing to see which state had the most people represented on the call. Pennsylvania barely beat Michigan and Ohio tonight, but we have some folks here with us from Georgia and from Arizona and from Illinois and from all over the place. And so it's exciting to be able to spend this time together with the group, but also it's exciting to be able to spend this time together with you, our podcast listening audience. We're grateful to be able to carve out this time each week to talk about different issues that we face when developing our online platforms. And the information that we're going to be talking about today, the content that we're going to be talking about today is something that, and I just mentioned this to our group here, if you actually put what I'm about to share into practice in your own way, you don't have to do this the way I'm doing. So what I'm about to share is not prescriptive, but what I hope you do is take some inspiration from what I'm about to share, because it really will help you with what you're building. And I think this is one of those concepts that differentiates those who are successful at developing an online platform from those who just become hobbyists, those who just tinker with it. So if it's your goal to really build a message-based online platform that reaches a lot of people and maybe even potentially becomes a source of income, this is the way to do it. If this is not what you choose to do, that's also fine. Develop it however you choose to do it. But understand that if you want this to become something that has kind of staying power and really sticks around and really helps and reaches a lot of people and becomes the type of thing that people talk about and share, this is something that I think will help you with that kind of ambition, because what we're going to be talking about today is the concept of developing your ideal workflow for content creation. Now, what do I mean by that? Your ideal workflow for content creation. This is, by the way, the kind of subject that I like to talk about a lot. And you may remember some of the previous content that I shared related to my content waterfall. Well, this is something that goes along with that very well. And I want to share a little story to kind of set up how I came to understand this idea of developing an ideal workflow for creating content. So when I finished my college years, what I did immediately, and I mean immediately after finishing college, I immediately ventured into a unique and often misunderstood career. I became a pastor right after I finished college. And the church I was hired to serve was a very small country church that felt like it was in the middle of nowhere. I was actually driving by that area just a little over a week ago, and was just kind of reminded how it really felt like it was out in the middle of nowhere to me. And according to census data, however, there were 331 people who lived in that community, but I'm not sure where they were hiding, because it felt like the real number was closer to maybe about 100. But according to the census, there were technically 331 people that lived in that community. But even though it was small, even though it felt like it was out in the middle of nowhere, I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to do a good job serving my congregation. I also wanted to do a good job serving the community and getting to know people in the community. And I was dedicated to do it. Now, when it comes to the tasks that a pastor does, it's come to my attention that there is a lot of confusion that surrounds the weekly tasks of a pastor, because the most visible thing a pastor does each week is he leads a worship service and preaches on Sunday mornings. That's the main thing that people see a pastor doing. I honestly think that there are some people that think that that might be the only thing that a pastor does. I can't tell you how many times over the past 25 years I've heard jokes about pastors only working for an hour each Sunday. And by the way, even as I'm sharing this, there are several people in our members club who are people that are well seasoned in vocational ministry, and they've probably heard that same joke. And over the past 25 years, I've heard that time and time again. Even my own father, who I call on Sunday afternoons, I'll just have a conversation with him, and he'll say, "Well, how did your 1 hour of work go this week?" And he knows that in doing that he's just doing that to try and kind of bust my chops a little bit. But at the same time, it's something I've heard many, many times, because I don't think that people really understand what a pastor does. If you're a church-going person, I can assure you that unless you have the worst pastor in the world, he is working more than an hour a week on his teaching and his preaching and his counseling and his leading and his administration and his outreach, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're talking to me, I even pull weeds and do the bushes outside of our church. So I'm just telling you, it's more than an hour of work. But when I first took the role, I'll kind of give you a picture of my enthusiasm. Like, I was very enthusiastic about it. I was just so excited to have the opportunity. It was such a change of pace. It was just a different way of going about my day-to-day responsibilities. And my very first few weeks on the job, I remember noticing in particular how drastically different this new role as a pastor, how drastically different it felt from every other job I had ever had. And what I mean by that is this. So instead of clocking in at a set time, like I had with all my other jobs, and then taking care of the tasks that my boss told me to accomplish, and then clocking out at the end of a shift, my schedule was all of a sudden more flexible. And I discovered that the job wasn't about being on duty during certain hours and then off duty during others. It was actually more about accomplishing certain tasks that had weekly or seasonal deadlines, and then proactively planning for the future, and then investing myself in the well being of the people that I served, and then developing relationships in the community. These were some of the main tasks that I needed to be focused on. And it wasn't done in the same way where you would just clock in and clock out. It wasn't like that. In essence, I would always be on duty in some sense of the word, and I would be held responsible for outcomes, not hours. So it was a very different way to look at my responsibilities. And I remember as I came to understand that, I started wondering if there was a wise way, a particular way that I should carve up my weekly schedule to make sure I was staying on task. So I remember just speaking with a pastor who had been serving for a few decades at that point. He was an older pastor, certainly older than me. And I asked him if he could give me some advice. I wanted some advice on how I should carve up my weekly schedule. And this is the advice he gave me. You could tell me if you think this was helpful advice or not helpful advice. But he said, my advice is to take time off when you can, because there will be some weeks when it's literally impossible to do so. And in time, I learned exactly what he meant. But I remember at the time feeling a little disappointed with that advice because I really just wanted a practical metric that I could use to organize my weekly schedule. I wanted to know some of the best practices for what to do on each day of the week, what tasks I should be doing on Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday. What should I be doing each day of the week and which hours I should be working on those tasks. I was hoping he would have some sort of a suggestion for me, but his main suggestion was all about, listen, if you get the opportunity to take a break, don't waste that opportunity. And I think he probably was feeling kind of exhausted when he gave me that advice, but it ended up being good advice. It just wasn't exactly what I was really asking him about. And what I ended up discovering was that in time, I noticed that every pastor does this very differently. Some are very rigid about their schedules, and some are flexible. And some guys I think are proactive and some are reactive. And in the end, I basically just needed to figure out what worked for me. So that's what I did. And I'm grateful that I learned that lesson early, because over the years, as I've added tasks, um, just various tasks to my weekly routine that are involved in developing an online platform. And at this point, I'm managing 17 different sources of income. And I'm always trying to figure out what's the best way to optimize my schedule and my time, and how can I best do this? And basically what I've learned is I have needed to apply the principles that I learned from pastoral ministry to the other forms of work that I'm doing, particularly when it comes to content creation. Now, if you're creating an online platform, and if you're developing a message-based business of some kind, you're going to need to create regular content. That's a given. If you aren't creating that content on a consistent and predictable basis, I highly doubt that you're going to succeed, because You won't be giving your audience what they're coming to you for. So just imagine for a quick second your favorite TV shows. So think about what some of those might be. And imagine if those TV shows only released episodes on occasion without any rhyme or reason. Do you suppose that would impact your watching habits in a negative way? If you never knew when that TV show was going to be releasing a new episode, and if you never knew if the show had ended or if it was going to be continuing or what was going on with it, do you think that would impact your watching habits in a negative way? Of course it would, right? Or how about this? What if you attempt to tune into the Super Bowl this year, but it wasn't airing because the NFL got busy doing something else that week? Do you suppose that would damage your opinion of their brand? Or how about this? What if you subscribe to a magazine, but that magazine that you subscribe to rarely shows up? Would you keep paying for your subscription or would you cancel it? Well, I think the answers to those, it's all obvious, right? If people are inconsistent about producing and delivering content, it will negatively impact your desire to even access that content. You may eventually give up even trying. And I believe that those same principles, it applies to platform development. The platforms that succeed produce consistent content without failing to deliver at a precise time. Now, hear me again. Let me say that again. The platforms that succeed, they produce consistent content without failing to deliver at a precise time. The platforms that fail never give themselves the opportunity to earn credibility with an audience because the person behind the platform isn't committed to a workflow that delivers content on a set schedule. I have two different platforms that emphasize completely different things. I have a faith-based platform that delivers content that's aimed at helping people grow spiritually. I also have this platform. And if you're acquainted with what we do here in Platform Launchers, what we do here is in this platform, we teach people the art and the science of online platform development. So I've got the faith-based platform and I've got a platform development platform. And both platforms are succeeding. And one of the biggest reasons that that's the case is because I stick to my workflow and I deliver the content that I have promised to deliver without fail. So let me be even more specific about how I'm doing this. Since January 2016, I have never skipped a day of delivering my most popular podcast, which is the Chapter a Day audio Bible. So that's, at this point, as I'm recording this, that's 6.5 years. I've never skipped a day of delivering that content. It's gone out every day. It just a couple weeks ago, just crossed over its 8 millionth download. And it just continues to plug along. The same is also true for my other shows. I'm hosting 4 podcasts at present. And the same is true for each of them. Once they started, once I found the workflow for them, I stuck to the workflow. I also stick to my weekly blog posts, my newsletters, my live calls, my other scheduled events, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, this is it. If I say I'm going to do it, I do it. So just think about that in relation to what you're building. And if you're trying to develop an online platform, and if you do that, if you want to do that, your credibility means a lot. So if you say you're going to do something, do it in all areas of life. But for our discussion here, in relation to the content you deliver for your platform, if you say you're going to deliver it, if you say you've got content coming out on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, always deliver it on the day that you've promised your audience that it's going to come. So let me give you an example of what this looks like when it comes to content creation and my workflow, just to show you how I'm breaking this down over the course of the week. I'm creating content that I enjoy creating. I love creating this stuff. And I'm doing it in a way that does not conflict with my other responsibilities. Believe it or not, I have a lot of responsibilities outside of content creation. So when I'm creating this content, I need to make sure that I'm not neglecting ministry responsibilities and I'm not neglecting family responsibilities. And so what I tend to do, and this has been my pattern for the years that I've been doing this, I tend to focus on creating content during the margins of the day. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. I could also confess to you, I don't watch much TV. I watch some, especially during football season. I do like to watch football in particular, but I don't really watch much TV. And I'll also tell you, I'm careful about how much time I spend mindlessly consuming online content. I do consume plenty of online content, but I try not to just be a mindless content consumer when it comes to things online. I don't want to just be constantly scrolling and constantly spending time watching video or things like that in a mindless way. If I'm doing that, I want to be learning something that's going to be helping me with what I'm trying to build. And when I limit those mind-numbing distractions, what I've discovered is I have more time to create my own content. So here's how the week breaks down. This is my workflow. And by the way, as I share my workflow, this is not to say that you have to set yours up the same way. I don't think you have to set yours up the same way. The only reason I'm doing it this way is because this is what works for me. If something else works for you, do what works for you. Just stick to it. Whatever you've announced to people, whatever you've made yourself accountable to other people that you're going to do, if you say you're going to do it, keep doing it. So on a daily basis, what I do is I produce 2 short form podcast episodes. Sometimes I batch load that content. Oftentimes I don't. But each day I produce 2 short form podcast episodes. It does not take a lot of time for me to do that. It's just become part of the rhythm of my daily schedule. Now on Sundays and Tuesdays tend to be my main days, I think, for putting content online. But on Sunday, what I do is I record and edit one long form podcast. I upload a 2,200 word blog post. I schedule a newsletter. The newsletter goes out on Tuesdays, but I actually schedule it on Sundays. And I make social media posts to promote the new blog content. So once the blog is updated and uploaded to the internet, once it's live, I just post it in several places on social media. So that's my Sunday workflow. And then on Monday, other than the fact that on a daily basis, I do I produce the 2 short form podcast episodes. On Monday, I don't spend Mondays creating content. I do other stuff on Mondays. On Tuesdays, I write a 1,300 word blog post. I teach an online membership session. I create a long form podcast episode. I create a short YouTube video. I create a long form training video. I upload the blog post and I schedule another newsletter. So you could look at Tuesday and say there's a lot of platform stuff going on Tuesday. A lot of content creation happens on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, I'm not really creating content, not usually. On Friday, I write the 2,200 word blog post, upload on Sunday. Now I'll give you a secret what I'm talking about with that. That's with the sermon prep that I'm doing for my ministry role as a pastor. I make sure that my notes are such that I can also use them as a blog post. And then when I record that long form podcast episode, it's a recording of the sermon that I'm preaching on Sunday morning. So I'm utilizing content that's being created for that ministry. I'm also using it in platform content that I'm delivering. But then I do that on Friday. I make sure that that blog post is ready to go on Friday, and then I upload that blog post on Sundays. And then I would say on the margins of the day, so this is either early morning or late evening, I just have fun working on new forms of content when I feel inspired to do so. And some days I feel inspired to do it, and some days I don't. So with those margins, if I want to work on something new or something different that's outside of my workflow, I just squeeze it into the margins there, or I don't. Sometimes I don't feel like it. So I already have a workflow where I'm committed to a whole bunch of other stuff. So every week I'm producing plenty of content. But if I want to do some new things or experiment with some new things, I just do that in the margins of the day. And I just have fun with it. And some of the content I create goes nowhere because I don't even let anyone see it. I have a whole bunch of stuff written that will probably never see the light of day. And that's fine with me because probably the reason I haven't shared it is because I don't think it's good enough to share. But sometimes I come up with an idea that becomes part of my regular workflow because I realize, oh, wait a second, this is a good thing. I want this to be part of the routine. But that's how I carve up the week. So I have daily things that I'm doing that aren't too time consuming, but I have stuff on Sunday, things on Tuesday, and things on Friday. So Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday is when I would say the bulk of my content gets created. And then again, I've got the margins of the day that I'm creating some content just for fun. Now, to some people, when I recognize when I read that list, when I go through my schedule, I realize that to some people, this probably sounds like a lot of work. And I understand that. And I'm not trying to make it sound like a whole bunch of work, because to me, it's just as much enjoyment as it is work. Nobody's making me do any of this. This isn't something that I'm being forced to do. I do this because this is the biggest way that God seems to be enabling me to help other people. And so I have to admit, and I know that those of you that are creating platform content, those of you that are live on the call here with me right now, and those of you that are listening to this via the podcast or maybe even finding us on YouTube, you probably find it gratifying and rewarding to serve people with the content that you're producing too. And when I'm serving people with the content that I'm producing, I find it very, very rewarding. I enjoy it. I feel like God keeps opening up doors for me to walk through to serve people with this content. So I just keep walking through those doors and trying to be grateful about it. And everything that you heard me, just share there about my workflow. Again, nobody's making me do that. I set it up that way because that's what I like doing and how I like doing it. I feel internally motivated to be doing this, but once I announce publicly that I'm going to be doing something, I stick with it unless for some reason it needs to change, but I make my audience aware of the changes if I'm about to make a change, and I let them know why. Now, from a spiritual standpoint, because that's something I care about deeply, when I'm creating this content, when I'm doing this, when I'm following through on this workflow, this feels to me like a big part of my purpose in life, at least during this season of my life. I feel like one of the things I'm called to do is to create this content. And so from a spiritual standpoint, I sense purpose in the midst of this. From a business standpoint, I have now become a safe bet for those who want to partner with me. And I'll give you two examples of how this has benefited me from a business standpoint. This approach to content creation, developing a workflow that I stuck with for years and years and years, even before it gained a lot of traction, this approach directly contributed to the fact that I was offered a book deal with a generous advance from the largest publisher in America. So that factored into it. This workflow also just factored into the fact that I just signed a six-figure contract with a popular media network. If I was not able to demonstrate with them or to them this kind of workflow and the results that come from it, I believe a big part of it is that God has blessed it. So I want to make sure to acknowledge that. But I also know that following through on this over a long period of time has really contributed to the development of this. And I don't believe I would have been offered that contract if not for really sticking to this workflow. I also don't believe I would have been offered that book contract that I was offered if I didn't stick with this workflow of content creation. So let me say this as we finish up here. If you're a content creator, your mind probably thinks like an artist. I very much think like an artist when I'm creating content. I think I'm mostly balanced in this area because I'm half artist and I'm half pragmatist, but I realize that some of us tilt more toward artist and some of us tilt more toward pragmatist. But if you're a content creator, there's got to be a good part of your mind, I would assume, that thinks like an artist. That is a gift. That is a wonderful thing. But I want to encourage you to also let yourself think like a pragmatist. Combine both perspectives, because pragmatically, if you develop a scheduled workflow that you remain faithful to over a long period of time, even on the days when you don't feel like it, you'll become a content creation superhero that I think your friends, by the way, your friends who are probably spending all their waking hours watching TV, I think they're going to marvel at the content that you're creating if you find a workflow that works for you and then you stay committed to it. So think about these things, because I really do believe that this is one of those things that differentiates those who succeed in platform development and those who don't. If you're the type of person who understands the message that they have been called to create or deliver, I should say, and the content that they're called to create to really get that message out there, you're going to have a deep sense of intrinsic motivation to do this. And if you develop a workflow that works for you and then you stick with it, before you know it, you're going to have volumes and volumes and volumes of helpful content. And you're probably also going to have an audience that genuinely appreciates the way that you're serving them and bringing benefit to their life. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to segue to conversation with our members club. We have a members only Q&A that happens right after we record these podcast episodes. We record these live in front of our group, and I just love meeting with this group each week. We have a lot of fun developing our platforms together. And all sorts of platforms are being developed in this group. And if you're listening to us today, or if you're watching us on YouTube, I just want to encourage you to stop by platformlaunchers.com. We'd love to invite you to take a test drive of our members club. You could do it for free for a couple weeks and see if it's the right fit for you. Or maybe you're someone who doesn't really see yourself joining a membership community and being part of something like that where you interact with people. Something else that I have not highlighted a lot on this podcast that I want to just quickly highlight. If you go to platformlaunchers.com, we also have our launch plan course that will walk you through the main steps of building an online platform. And if you'd like to take that as a tool that will help you with your online platform development, you'll also find that at the website. But we also just love meeting people in person. So if you're able to join us, we'd invite you to join us sometime for our live calls. Again, go to platformlaunchers.com, take a 2-week test drive, and it's all free for a couple of weeks if you want to try it out and see if it's a good fit for you. And you get to meet the members of our members club, join us in our forums, view the full 60-minute replays of all our training calls and our members only Q&A, and you get to jump in here on the conversation. And if that's not for you, but you'd like some course content, we have that over at platformlaunchers.com as well. But that's it for us this week. Thanks again for joining us for this week's episode of the podcast, and we look forward to catching up with you again next time.